right, so we're going to get started here. And as Kim and I were talking about what kind of workshop, we thought that this would be helpful. So I started Get Ready for College. So maybe some of you attended college before, maybe not. For you as you prepare. And please note, here's my email address and my phone number. Even though we're all working remotely, you can still get me by either of those options. So first of all, what I want to do is talk about for fall semester and COVID-19. We do not know exactly how fall semester is going to look. We do know that your courses that you've signed up for are going to be offered in 3 different options. Your first option is going to be blended hybrid. And so what that will be means you will be on campus and you will be spending some time there, but part of it will be online. At this point, I do not believe that any of the classes will be 100% on campus, as we're trying to do some social distancing. So what that will be, you'll look on your schedule and it will say blended hybrid. So if you have a class Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 10, it may show that you're on campus Mondays and Wednesdays, or maybe Mondays from 9 to 10, and then the rest of the instruction will be online. Your second option is going to be completely online asynchronous. So that means 100% of it is online. You don't come to campus at all. And asynchronous means that there are no scheduled meeting times for you to be like in a Zoom meeting or for you to be online. There's no proctored exams that you have to come on campus for. You will do the course at your own pace. However, you do have to meet the deadlines. So your class, I teach a class, for example, all of my assignments are due at 11:59 p.m. on a Monday. So you have to get everything done by 11:59 p.m. on a Monday. I don't care whether you do it at 11:58 or you do it the week before, but there's no time that you have to sit down, log in like we are today. So that's the asynchronous part. Completely online synchronous means it's all online. There's nothing in person. So no in-person meetings, no in-person proctored exam, but the course will have required synchronous or scheduled meetings. And everybody from the class will be on together, just like we are today. So you may have a class that meets Monday, Wednesday, Friday from 9 to 9:50. You don't come on campus, but you'll still have a lecture. Just like I'm talking today, your teacher will be talking. You'll be able to see your classmates. You'll do discussions. It's really kind of cool. You can do breakout rooms. You can do lots of different kinds of things. But please watch your schedule. If you registered for courses in April or May or June, things could change. We hope to know in the next couple of weeks what that's going to look like. So keep asking questions and keep watching your schedule. So I wanted to just talk about motivation. So here's a definition of motivation from the Oxford Dictionary. Motivation is the reason or reasons one has for acting or behaving in a particular way. So you've all registered for college. You're looking forward to fall semester. And I want you to think about why. So you want to be a teacher. You want to be an electrician. You want to be get your generals done and transfer to a 4-year degree. But typically, when we look at motivation and we look at students in college success, it is not college things that get in the way of being success. It's all of those other kinds of things. And we know as students, if any of you work with me for any period of time, I'm going to talk about our plates. So it's like going to the buffet. We bring, or maybe you had a 4th of July picnic. So your plates are only so big. So when we bring it up to the buffet and we start heaping things on, right? So we've got our family life and our personal things, and we've got our work life, and we put that on, and now we're adding school. And sometimes our plates are so big, things start to fall off. And typically it's school because the other things that we have in our life. So it's really important to think about, why am I here? What are my goals? And how can I be successful? How can I be motivated or make this a priority? So to stay motivated and to do well in school, you kind of have to identify what are your values, what's important to us. And sometimes it's not what we value, it's what requires. I'm a parent. My children require things from me. I am a daughter. My elderly parents require things of me. So you have to think about what are your responsibilities and how is school going to fit into that. And then you want to recognize what you're good at and what you aren't. We all have different skills and talents. You wouldn't want me putting things together, reading a blueprint, a widget, or a gadget. I could probably do it. I'd be miserable and I wouldn't probably do it very well. So make sure that you know what that is, and then understand what your own personal situation is. Again, what are those outside commitments? What things do you know that you need to do that we can't change, because we all have those. So when you're looking at school, you'll want to look at your schedule, and you will be registered for a certain number of credits. So we'll do 12 credits because math not my strong suit. So if you're registered for 12 credits, if we were on campus, you would be in class about 12 hours a week. And you'd have 24 then outside hours. So some of you that are in technical programs, some of those 24 hours may come in labs. So you may learn about Ohm's law in the electrician program in a lecture setting, and then you go to the lab where you're learning about wiring, you're connecting wires, you're doing the things with electricity that you need to do. So if you're registered for 12 credits, and it's going to be different this fall because of COVID, so you just have to look and say, I'm going to need about 36 hours a week in my schedule, so how am I going to do that? If I don't go to campus at all, if I don't set foot on campus, how am I going to schedule those 36 hours? When am I going to read? When am I going to get that done? If you're taking 16 credits, it can be up to 48 hours. Now, some classes won't take that long. Some will. And then again, you'll have to think about what you're good at, and some things may take longer than others. So you'll want to plan for that. In order to be successful, you also need to be organized. And in order to study, you need to be able to locate your notes and books and handouts. You know, the days of getting paper handouts really, it doesn't happen a lot. And so you'll have to develop some kind of a system to stay organized. So whether it's you like the paper, you can print it out. Most of you probably say, gee, Dawn, we can tell how old you are. We don't print anything out and put it anywhere. Or an electronic system. But figure out how you're going to get that done. And it's really important, I think, to plan to take time before or after a class to review notes and readings while it's fresh in your mind, and try to make those connections when you're able to. Establishing a study routine. You really should schedule time to study each day. If you don't have a planner or an organizational system, get one. As a student, you get Office 365 free. And we went over that in orientation. You log in with your student ID and your password, so you could keep your own calendar on there so you can see and see what happens. So if, and again, if it's all going to be dependent on if you're on campus or off campus, but for today's workshop, for example, I blocked off 30 minutes prior to this workshop so I could get prepared. I would suggest you do the same thing for your class. What are they going to talk about today? Did I get my reading done? Let me review my notes. Plan a time each week to review what you've covered that whole week. And if you try to establish a routine, so you study at the same time, then it just becomes habit. So you don't have to think about what am I going to study. You just look and say, okay, if I need to have 24 hours of study time per week, and I have 7 days, you're going to have to do 3 to 4 hours per day. So if you have a wedding on a Saturday, how is that going to get done? If you are going on a family vacation Friday, Saturday, Sunday, now you have 4 days to get those 24 hours done. How are you going to do that? You just want to account for that. Yes.
Could I interrupt you for just a minute? We have a question in the chat that some other students might have as well. So I was going to type an answer, but then I thought maybe everybody. Is there a minimum number of credits you can take? Also, is one class equal to 1 credit?
Those are really good questions. So there is no minimum number of credits or courses that you can take. You can take one course. Each course is going to have a different credit requirement. Some credit or some courses are 1 credit, some are 2. The majority of our college courses fall in that 3 credit category. And then there's some 4, or there's some like our biologies and chemistries for science majors would be 5 credits. And that would be your lecture time and your lab time. So, but getting back to the minimum number of credits, there is not. But financial aid ties in there as well. So in order, if you qualify for grants, which is money you don't have to pay back, you could, if you qualify, you can get financial aid at 1 credit. Not everybody qualifies for that. Loan money is the money that you do have to pay back, and everybody qualifies for some kind of a loan, but you need to have at least 6 credits in order to get a loan. All right. Thank you, Kim. If other questions come up, please, I don't have the chat up because I'm looking at my presentation. So, so how to make the most of your study time. So when you do have some study time set, you're going to want to make sure that you have a good study environment. And I think it's more important than ever with COVID, because you may have other people in your home that need to work from home or that need to study at home. And try to carve out your own little niche, because likely all of you will be doing something online or remote. So how are you going to do that? So make sure that it's in an area where you're not distracted, whether it's your TV or our cell phones, right, are always with us. Can you be somewhere where you can't be interrupted? For some of us, that's very difficult because we've got multiple roles in addition to students. But can you say, I have to study for the next hour, so somebody else is going to be in charge of whatever else needs to do. What's the lighting like? In college, I would say, ooh, I'm going to sit on my bed and I'm going to read, and I'd read for about 10 minutes and then fall asleep. So my studying never happened. So make sure that you have good lighting. Sometimes it's just hard to get started, right? You think, boy, we've got all of this stuff I have to do, but I really don't feel like it. So something that I think has worked well, and it worked well for my my kids, and my 22-year-old is in college, and he said that he still does this. We just had this conversation. If there's something he doesn't want to do, he sets a timer for 10 minutes and starts studying, and said, okay, I'm going to do this, and if I really want to quit when the timer is done, I'll quit. 9 times out of 10, you're not going to want to stop. You're going to want to finish that chapter. You're going to want to finish whatever it is that you've been putting off. So once you get started is usually the worst, for me anyway. And I would say that start with the one that is most difficult for you or that you don't like. Get that out of the way so the worst is over. And all the research shows that studying in 60 to 90-minute time periods is best. Once we reach that time, you got to take a break and then maybe switch subjects, get up, walk around the block, whatever it is, have a latte, whatever, that something for you to break up that time. And the other thing that I would say is, oops, I'm going to go back, is that I've learned working remotely since March is you need to have a good, comfortable chair, and have a good, comfortable, and have a spot. You can work at the dining room table for a period of time, and then you're going to need somewhere that's your spot. And again, maybe that you can leave your things so you can just sit down. So if you can get a dedicated spot, that would be great. I'm going to now talk about learning from different venues. So lecture. So whether you're going to be sitting in a classroom or sitting in a Zoom like this, listening, or there might be recorded lectures or videos that you have, listening to lectures or taking notes is really important. And so in order to do that, you want to be a good listener and be able to be prepared. So if you know what the lecture is going to be about, I think it's easier to take notes because you kind of have a familiarity with that. So read the chapters, review any postings or anything ahead of time to be prepared. If you're in class, I am a person that needs to sit in the front row because I get distracted. If I'm in the back row, I'm making a grocery list, I'm thinking about what I'm going to do for the weekend. It's harder for me to stay engaged. Again, if you're at home and you're remote, how can you eliminate most of those distractions for you? And maybe that means for some of us putting our cell phones on the other side of the room, that kind of a thing. So if you are somebody's lecturing and they're writing things down, or they have a PowerPoint like this, I would do the bullet points. What was the overview in the beginning of the lecture? So for me today, it was about what is organization, study skills, stress management. So then you kind of have an idea, oh, that's what Dawn's going to talk about today. So hopefully, because when I talk and I lecture and I set up my classes, I go in a logical sequential order that makes sense for me. May not make sense for you, but hopefully then I'm kind of keeping things together, right, as we go along. You may have some people that don't do that, or that say, oh, I forgot to tell you something about slide 1 and I'm on slide 15. So what is the overview? So you kind of know what's happening today. What questions are asked of you? So if the person lecturing says, out of these 6 things, what do you feel is the most important? That's kind of a key, like, oh, I should really maybe hone in on that. You always want to focus in too on terms and definitions and some of those kinds of things. That is likely you'll see that information again. And information that is repeated or emphasized. I think about when I do orientation, I talk about the drop add period probably 6 times because that is super important for students to know. So if you're in a learning environment where somebody's talking about and mentioning something 3, 4 times, that also is, I've heard this before. I'm going to write that down or I'm going to remember that. When you're writing down notes, think about things. So you may want to develop some kind of a shorthand or abbreviation mode, especially if a teacher or professor is talking really quickly. The key is to remember what your abbreviation or shorthand is. Sometimes I take notes and I'm like, I don't remember what this was. There was something that happened to be super helpful for me is using a half-page system when I was taking notes. So if I have my notebook, I just draw a line down the middle of the page, and on the left, that's where I put down some notes, and then on the right, I can go back and tie concepts together. So I can say, or if the professor is talking about, 7 layers of skin, for example, and we're going through layer 1 and layer 2 and layer 3, and then I remember something that I've read or something that I have from a previous experience, I can write it over in that right-hand column, and then afterwards I can be able to condense those and put those things together. And I can't see, I can see Kim and I can see one other student. So if you, I usually ask, has anybody ever made a grocery list or a list of some kind? Say you're going on a trip or camping, you write the list down, you forget it on the table. How many of you remember that? If you're shaking your head, you can give me a thumbs up. But if that's you, rewriting and condensing your notes after class could be really beneficial to you. When I make a list, let's say I'm going to the grocery store and I make a list, I write things down, I forget the list on the table, and I get to the store, I can remember about 80 to 90% of the things on the list. That tells me that when I write something down, I'm more likely to remember it. If that's you, rewriting and condensing your notes after class would be a really good way for you. That's a study skill. That's a study tip. So just by redoing that and writing it, you're likely to remember in the future. When you're taking notes, leave space so you can go back and fill in the gaps. If you're visual, maybe an outline or a flow chart when you take notes. So I can tell you that if we had questions from a chart or a graph or an outline in a book, I likely never got those right because that doesn't mean anything to me. Now, I have a coworker that does everything in flowchart form because that's how her brain works. That's how she remembers things. So if that's you, come up with your own flowchart. Come up with your own outline. That may be helpful for you. I would suggest that you read and review your notes daily. So if you have a 3-credit class that meets 3 times a week or would meet 3 times a week, go through your notes 3 times. So if you have a lecture on Monday, so whether it's all online and you watch it, whether it's, so that would be asynchronous, you watch it on your own. Whether it's synchronous, it's a time that you're watching here like Zoom, or if it's on campus, take your notes on Monday. Wednesday, read Monday's notes before you do whatever you're going to do on Wednesday. And then after class on Wednesday, read Mondays and Wednesday's notes. Before you go to class Friday, skim over what did I learn previous this week. So whether it was in a traditional classroom, whether it's an online alternative delivery, or whether it's you're totally on your own, review that before you get to Fridays. And then once you get to the end of the week, you've got it all there, and it's more, it's in your memory, and it will just be easier for recall. If flashcards work for you, there's some great electronic flashcard forms, or you could go to a department store and get those note cards that we all had back in college when we didn't have smartphones, and you can take those along with you, whether you're in the car or anytime you have free time, and you can whip through those flashcards and learn from that. And then if there's something that you missed or something that you don't understand, talk with your instructors and your classmates. So organizing things, you might want to do, if you want hard copies, you can do 3-ring binders, notebooks, color coding, you can do 1 large binder for everything. If you're doing electronic, you can set up folders in your Outlook account. There's organizational tools and other kinds of things that you can use. Whatever works best for you, and that's going to be totally individual. And you might use a combination of. So when you're reading material, and you have to read a textbook, and college textbooks, again, I didn't read many textbooks in high school, true disclosure, but when I got to college, I figured out I needed to read, because your instructors and teachers likely aren't going to lecture on what you read. You want to read actively. Make sure that you read everything, even charts and graphs, because that could certainly be on the test. And then it's important to know that all books are written differently. So some are really well organized or fit to your learning style. Others may seem super jumbled and they don't follow a sequential pattern. Different types of books require different reading. So a biology textbook may take you longer to read than a literature book, for example. And so when you're thinking about your study time, you're going to want to, once you read a page or a chapter, time yourself. How long is it going to take to read a page? So if you have 20 pages in a biology book and it takes you 3 minutes to get through, that's going to be longer than if you're reading a fiction book for a literature class. And make sure that you have enough time for that. Again, moderate amount of reading material, 50 to 90 minutes at a time. If the chapter has a summary, you may want to read that first. It may seem backwards, but if you read the summary, you have an idea of what the chapter is going to be about. So you can say, okay, well, now I know we're going to talk about the 7 layers of skin. So when you go back through, you've got some connection points for that. If there's words you don't understand, look them up and then read the whole chapter. I think it's helpful if you can read a whole chapter at a sitting. It kind of connects it. Even when I read for pleasure, if I read a few pages here and there, it's hard for me to connect to that story. Same thing for reading a textbook. So here is a reading method. It's called the SQ3R method, and you can see where it's taken from here. But survey the chapter. So see what it's all about. Question yourself, what do I know about this already? Have we learned anything about this? Do I have any real life experience? Then you're going to read it, to read the chapter, and then quiz yourself. What did I learn about this chapter? What points did I take away? And this is where you may even want to take notes, and then just review it. And then that should give you a pretty good command of that content material. When you're reading, periodically stop reading and try to connect the concepts. Write notes or outline the chapter, especially for those of us that that works well for. If you don't understand it, you may have to reread it. If the material still is challenging, talk with your teacher or someone in the academic support center. All of your instructors are going to have office hours. So whether it's on campus or virtually or through Zoom, where you can connect with them, they expect and they want the students to say, I don't understand this. Can you help me with this? So you can only memorize things that you understand. So it's really important to understand the concept. And I think it's really helpful to make up your own examples. So don't just use the ones mentioned in class. Use something that may pertain to you. And as I said earlier, in college, it is not just a memorizing information and spitting and regurgitating, putting it exactly out there, like that one sheet of paper study guide like my kids brought home in high school. They will expect you to apply it. And that's what you're going to have to do in your career. So you'll have knowledge, but you're going to be able to have to apply and use some problem-solving skills. If you're visual, think in colors, pictures in your minds, use rhymes, and repetition really is the key. It's review and review and review. I don't know about you, but I've certainly crammed and I get to a test and then I can remember seeing it or thinking about it or hearing about it, but I'm not able to come up with the right answer. When you're studying, think about, are you a morning person? Are you an evening person? When are you most alert? When are you best able to focus? And I think that's important. I'll just tell you a little story. In college, many college students stay up late. That's just kind of how they're wired. All my roommates did, so I tried that as well. I am not a night person. I never have been. It is better for me to set my alarm for 5 or 6 in the morning and get up and study at that point. So think about what works best for you. Because if you're trying to study at a time that you're not alert or that you're exhausted, it's going to take you a lot longer and you're not going to be as successful. So make sure that you think about that. Is it too hot or too cold? Are you comfortable? I'm going to move on and talk about procrastination, because procrastination is a really huge issue for many of us, especially procrastination leads to more stress, more anxiety, and poor performance at school. I talked about the 10-minute timer. I think that that's good. If you have a large assignment, let's say you are taking a research or a paper writing class and you have to write a 5-page paper on a topic. And so that can be so overwhelming. Break it down. So first of all, let's pick a topic. So do that. And maybe that's what your goal is. So let's say, and you may know, school starts August 24th. You may have a paper due October 15th. So how can you break that up into smaller pieces? So maybe, get yourself settled. So at week 2, you're going to choose your topic. Week 3, you're going to reach out to the library and say, what kind of resources do you have on this topic? And again, if the library is open and we're on campus, you can go there physically. Otherwise, we'll do it electronically, and you'll be able to get some resource. And just break it up into short chunks. And you will be able to submit a paper either in person or electronically to have somebody review it. So if you're done, and you can't do that 2 hours ahead of time, so they're going to need probably 24 hours to review your paper, but they'll be able to do that. So make small steps and make a schedule. And again, put that in your planner, whether it's electronic or paper, so you have goals and things to meet each week. And then build in some rewards in there. So once you get your things done on time, what is it that you'd like to do? Maybe you want to watch Netflix. Maybe you want to go for a walk. Maybe you want to work out. So what kinds of things can you do to build in some joy and some time for yourself? And I think if you've got some deadlines, when I was in college, I never felt like I was done with my schoolwork. It just felt like it was looming and hanging over me, and it was stressful all the time. If you can set up a schedule and you know when things are due, you can get to a certain point and you say, you know what, I'm done with everything today. I don't have to do anything till Saturday morning, or whatever that is. And I think it allows for a stress release and something that we all need. Studies show that up to 40% of college students see procrastination as a real problem in their education. So not only a little problem, a major issue. 40%, that's a huge percentage of us. And then set priorities. What is a priority? Is getting school done. These are the things I have to get done today, whatever that may be. And then focus on your success. Again, why are you here? Where is it that you want to be? Goal setting is so important. If you don't know where you end up or where you're going, it's hard to come up with a good path to get there. What I like to do, I'm a list maker. What do I like to do and things I have to do? So you do some of those each day. So you have a nice balance there. Talked about dividing projects, and make sure that your schedule is realistic. We only have 24 hours in a day. And stress management, I think, is going to be more important than ever as we head into fall semester, because we don't exactly know what it's going to look like. Your classes may be modified a little bit or changed a little bit, and I think it's stressful for all of us. So not only adding school, but we've got the COVID pandemic too. And so stress is part of all of our every life. Some of us bring on more stress than others. I tend to worry about lots of things. So my life can be very stress-filled, and I bring a lot of it on myself. And it's important to look at, it's not always the events that are happening that cause us stress, but how we react or how we look at them. And symptoms of stress can be mental, social. Sometimes we have physical issues, so we're exhausted. We might be eating all the time or not eating at all. Headaches. Some of us cry. Some of us are exhausted and we sleep all the time. Some of us have insomnia. And some people use drug and alcohol to cope with stress as well. Is stress always bad? No. It can be really positive. Positive stress motivates us to be better, to work harder. Positive stress is also short term. So I look at short-term stress might be a semester. In a typical semester, for me personally, from mid-semester to the end was super stressful because we're getting into it the first couple of months, and then all of a sudden we have all of these assignments due, and then we've got finals coming up. And that's when students typically start to feel stressful. But if you look ahead on December 15th, that stress will end, right? So it's short term. And it can be exciting because we're in college, we're doing exactly what we want to do. And positive stress typically motivates us to improve our performance. So it's there, it's short term. We kick it into high gear till we get things done. Negative stress is the things that don't go away, that continues to build and build and build and build. And that is, if you don't deal with that stress and get rid of that stress, it can lead to lack of concentration, headaches, anxiety, fatigue. So what affects stress? It is our individual perception of stress, so how we look at things impacts. Two of us can be sitting in the same room. We can hear the exact same thing. I may be freaking out, and you may be thinking, Dawn, that's really not a big deal at all. So it's our perception. It's our how we look at things. Do you see things as a glass half full or half empty? And it's also important to your support network. Who do you have to support you, and what kind of support are they giving you? I'll give you an example. I had a job, 2 jobs out of college, and I worked with a bunch of people that weren't really happy with their job. And so when I would say something, they would say, yeah, Dawn, that's really terrible. I can't, that's awful. How do you put up with that? They added to my negativity and my stress, and I started looking at things differently than somebody that maybe would have said, you know what, Dawn, that does kind of stink, but what are some options? How can we work at making it better? Or how can we work at removing some of that? That would have been much better for me to hear that at that point in my life than telling me how terrible my job was, or that my job duties were, or how stressful it was. Perfectionism. Many of us want to do things perfect. We're high achievers. And then we criticize ourselves, right? When things don't go as well as they could have, or that we could have tried harder. I would just say, as you're heading into this first semester here, give yourself a little bit of grace. Your first test may not go as you had hoped. You've got a new teacher, right? You're learning new content information. We usually get better performers as we've taken a test once, or turned in an assignment once and figured out what teachers want. So give yourself a little bit of grace when you're heading into things. Control. Some of us, I really like to be in control. And when I'm not, when there's lots of things happening that are outside of my control, that is stressful for me. So whole COVID thing, full disclosure, working from home, having to learn how to redo my job was super stressful. But I had to work through that and figure that out. And that's been a good thing of COVID. Feeling a lack of control is a sign of failure, and difficulty delegating, especially when going to school. If you have a lot of home responsibilities, are there some things that you could delegate that you don't have to do yourself? People pleasing. Many of us do things and we want to make everyone else happy, but therefore make us kind of miserable, or we're worried about disappointing others. And many of us are really good at taking care of everybody else and not taking care of ourselves. And when you're going to college, it's really important to take some time to take care of yourself, whether it's go for a walk, whether it's just having some quiet time, some of that kind of thing. Confidence. Some of us aren't very confident in our skills, so maybe we don't feel we're as good as others. I took a college class with a good friend of mine who had this phenomenal memory, and he sat in the class like this with his arms folded, never took a note. I took notes fast and furious. He got a better grade than I did. That was his learning style. That I felt terrible about that. I didn't feel good about myself. I felt like I could have done more, and that subject could have been more it was a subject I didn't like, and it was a subject he really liked. And so it's hard not to, when we compare ourselves to others. And also, if you are with people and they tell you that you've done a good job, but you don't feel that you have, that adds stress too. Always feeling, striving to do better. So symptoms of stress. So when we need to pay attention to stress is check our feelings. Are we feeling anxious? Are we fearful? Are we irritable? Are we angry? Some thoughts could be, I'm not good enough. I think I'm going to fail. Worrying about the future. I've worked with nursing students on and off on my tenure here, and there's a higher level for grading for nursing students. So you feel if you don't pass this class or get a high enough grade, you can't go to the next level, and therefore you can't do this and you can't do that. And there's such a sense of pressure that if you don't do well on one test, you think 12 steps ahead and feel like you can't get to that end result. And so it's really best to focus on the here and now. What do I have that I need to work on? And not worry about that. And really reassure yourself. If things don't go well on your first test, your first assignment, or you miss a deadline as you're learning how this goes, it's one time. And my advice would be, there's nothing we can do about it. We can't change it. All we can do is learn from it, right? So let's say, okay, that didn't go as I had hoped. How can we move on? And reach out, talk to somebody in TRIO, talk to any of us in student services and say, this didn't go as I had hoped. Can you help me with this? And we absolutely will. So some stress or behavior can be crying, active impulsively, laughing a lot, nervous tone of voice. And again, as I had indicated, increased drug or alcohol use can all be really major signs that stress is getting to be too much for you. Physiologically, sweaty hands, increased heart rate, tiring easily, that feeling of butterflies in the stomach, changing in eating patterns. So how do we manage that? And stress management really is the ability to maintain control of ourselves when situations, so it can be people, it can be events, it can be classes, cause us to feel stress symptoms. So how are we going to manage that? First of all, is to take a look at, are we doing things in our life that could be adding to that stress? Staying up all night to study or not getting enough sleep, loading up on caffeine. A few years back, there was this, I read lots of articles on these high caffeinated drinks that college-age students weren't able to get enough sleep because they had so much caffeine, it was disrupting their sleep pattern. Having a study group, which turns into a study party, which results in a lot of socializing, not a lot of studying. Cramming, so waiting till the last minute, studying the morning before the test. Worrying about what's way ahead of us when we should just be focusing on the next step at hand, and trying to work and go to school full time. I've worked here a long time. Many students try to do that. Very, very few are successful, because as you saw with that study time, full-time school, you're probably going to be somewhere between 40 and 60 hours a week with school. And if you're working 40 hours a week, that's 80 to 100 hours a week. That doesn't leave you much time for anything else. So what can you do? So change those things that we talked about. So don't stay up all night. Have study groups if they're helpful for you. Remove yourself from a situation. So if you are in a situation, in a study group or something like that, take yourself out of there. Don't sweat the small stuff, and you have to decide what that small stuff is. When I work with students who also happen to be parents, I will tell them maybe cereal for dinner is okay. or if you have a young person that wants to wear the red shirt, but the red shirt is dirty, they're going to have to figure something else out. So those kinds of things. Change the way that you react to it and start small. What I have done in the past too is if something doesn't go my way, I might say, gosh, nothing ever turns out the way that I want it or works out for me. But when I look at it, it's really not never. It's small occasions and trying to change the way that I react and I see that. Again, to avoid those extreme reactions, get enough sleep. I can tell you, life for me is easier when I'm well rested and had a good balanced diet and something to eat. Learn how you relax best and do some of those things that help you relax, and set realistic goals. If we're working full-time, we're going to school full-time and we expect a 4.0 and that's not realistic. We're not gonna be able to measure up on all of those no matter who you are. So question in the chat says, when do you think we would start to get our class syllabus? So that would be typically the first week of the semester, with almost all or every class having an online component. My thought is it may be in D2L as well, and that might even be available a week before. So you can log into D2L and take a look using your star ID and password, and that's in the student login section on the top of our web page. And again, if you say, great, Dawn, but I don't know how to get into D2L, we will help you with that as well.